Hey friends, I recently noticed that almost 80% of viewers who enjoy these videos haven't subscribed yet. If you like the stories and want to see more, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement makes a huge difference and helps these stories reach more people. Thanks so much for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I'd love to know. Most people think of Thanksgiving as America's safest holiday. No fireworks like the 4th of July, no drunk drivers like New Year's Eve, no strangers at the door like Halloween, just family, food, and gratitude. That's the story we tell ourselves every November. That's the lie that makes us vulnerable. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and I've spent the last 15 years studying holiday-related crimes as a forensic psychologist. My office at the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit is lined with case files that most people would rather pretend don't exist. Thanksgiving week sees a 23% spike in domestic incidents, arguments that turn physical, old resentments surfacing over dinner, alcohol loosening the restraints people normally keep on their anger. Those cases are tragic, but they follow patterns. They make sense in the terrible logic of family dysfunction and substance abuse. But that's not what keeps me up at night. It's the other cases, the ones that don't fit patterns. The ones where something walks through the door during the most trusting moment of the year and no one sees it coming because we're too busy being grateful. We invite people into our homes, we let our guards down, we trust in the warmth of tradition. We light candles, we set extra places at the table. We open our doors to neighbors and distant relatives, and sometimes even strangers who look like they need somewhere to belong. Sometimes, that trust is the door we shouldn't have opened. The 4 cases I'm about to share with you came across my desk at different times over the past decade. I've changed the names to protect the survivors and the families of those who didn't survive, but every other detail remains exactly as it was documented. Each case represents a different violation of what I call the Thanksgiving contract, that unspoken agreement that this one day we're safe, that trust matters, that family protects family, that hospitality is sacred, that gratitude is enough to keep the darkness away. These 4 stories prove that sometimes it isn't. I keep these files separate from my others. They sit in a locked drawer in my office, and I only open it once a year, right before Thanksgiving. Not because I'm morbid or because I want to frighten myself, but because these cases changed how I see that holiday. How I see dinner tables and candlelight, and the smell of roasted turkey. How I understand that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who know exactly when we're most vulnerable. Who understand that tradition makes us complacent, that gratitude can blind us to warning signs we'd normally catch. Each of these 4 cases represents a different kind of violation. The first is about trust, what happens when someone we're trying to help turns our compassion into a trap. The second is about safety, the discovery that your home has never been truly yours. The third is about family and what fills the vacuum when we're absent too long. The fourth is about hospitality, opening your door to someone who's been waiting for exactly that invitation. Some of these people survived, some didn't. All of them were changed. And if you're reading this the night before Thanksgiving, if you're preparing your home for guests or packing your bags to visit family, I want you to remember something. The holiday doesn't protect you. The turkey and the candles and the gratitude don't create a force field against the world's darkness. If anything, they make you more visible to it. Let me introduce you to the people whose stories taught me that lesson. Ross G. Brown had been a geriatric care specialist for 12 years when this happened. He knew medications the way most people know their favorite songs, every interaction, every side effect, every subtle sign that something was off. He'd worked hospice, memory care units, and home health visits. He'd seen families at their most vulnerable, their most desperate, their most loving. That's why he volunteered for the hospital's Thanksgiving meal delivery program. He told me later, during our interview, that he believed nobody should have to eat alone on Thanksgiving. That isolation was its own kind of death for the elderly. He thought he was delivering a meal to a lonely widow named Mrs. Patricia Hemmings. Instead, he walked into a house where Thanksgiving dinner had been going on for 3 days, and none of the guests could leave. The medications Ross knew so well, the benzodiazepines, the sedatives, the pain management drugs he'd administered to countless patients, had been weaponized. Turned into invisible chains that kept adult children and grandchildren trapped at a table, barely conscious, while their captor smiled and served another round of drugged sweet tea. When I asked Ross what detail haunted him most, He didn't hesitate. The dosage chart, he said. She'd been planning it for months, testing amounts, taking notes on who was resistant, who needed more. It was meticulous, professional, like she'd studied nursing just to learn how to trap her family. He paused, then added, "She really did love them, you know. That was the worst part. She loved them so much she couldn't let them leave, even if it killed them." Ross still checks medication cabinets when he visits anyone's home. He can't help it anymore. His hands move automatically, counting pills, checking dates, looking for the kind of stockpiling that preceded Mrs. Hemming's Thanksgiving. His wife tells me he wakes up, sometimes counting dosages in his sleep. 4 college roommates, Stephen, Potter, Micah, and Dean, thought they were celebrating their first adult Thanksgiving. Independence, freedom. No parents hovering, no family drama, just 4 friends in a cheap rental house near campus, making too much food and documenting it all for Stephen's video project. They joked about the house being haunted, the sealed door in the living room, the closet that didn't match the room's proportions, the landlord's weird eagerness to rent it so cheap. College students always joke about haunted houses. It's part of the experience. They found a journal in their rental house, a leather-bound book tucked in the back of the highest kitchen cabinet, behind serving dishes no one had touched in years. The entries were about them, written by someone who'd been watching, someone who knew Stephen talked to himself when he cooked, someone who knew Micah left lights on all night because he was afraid of the dark, someone who knew Potter checked the locks twice before bed, someone who knew Dean's girlfriend visited every Wednesday at 7 p.m., someone who was still there. The passages between the walls were intricate. Months of construction, maybe years, hidden rooms in the attic, observation points behind vents, and loose outlet covers. Dozens of journals documenting previous tenants, going back half a decade. The person who wrote them was never found. They vanished when the police arrived, slipping through those same passages, disappearing into the neighborhood like they'd been practicing that escape route for years. Stephen still has the video footage from that night. Sometimes he watches it, frame by frame, looking for the face he knows is there in the background, and he finds it, in reflections, in shadows behind doorways. In the darkness of that sealed door during the first week, when they were unpacking and laughing and had no idea they were performing for an audience of 1. Someone who'd been waiting so long for company, someone who thought they could finally introduce themselves on Thanksgiving, when people are supposed to welcome strangers. José K. Galante was an architect specializing in historic home restoration. He understood structures, spaces, the way houses hold secrets in their bones. He hadn't been home in almost 2 years. Work kept him away, then excuses did. His parents were in their late 70s. His mother's voice on the phone had that fragile quality that finally made him book the trip home for Thanksgiving. His parents greeted him with confusion, not joy. They'd been having Thanksgiving dinners with José for months, weekly visits, repairs around the house, conversations about topics the real José had never discussed. Someone had been systematically replacing him in his parents' lives, filling the vacuum his absence had created. Someone who knew exactly how to be the son they wished they had. The imposter had been building towards something. Power of attorney papers were found in a toolbox that didn't belong to José's father. Financial documents, access to accounts. The con was sophisticated, part of a pattern targeting elderly couples whose children lived far away. But what haunted José wasn't the crime itself, it was his parents' faces when the stranger walked through their door on Thanksgiving, expecting to be welcomed as their son, and found the real José sitting at the table. José moved back within a month. He quit his job, sold his condo, moved into his childhood bedroom. But his mother still looks at him sometimes, like she's comparing him to someone else. Someone who visited every week. Someone who fixed things without being asked. Someone who might have been a lie, but was present in a way her real son hadn't been. And José wonders, late at night, if part of his mother misses the imposter more than she'd ever admit. Dwayne N. Cooper had been driving trucks for 23 years. He knew empty roads, rural routes, the difference between a place that's isolated and a place that feels wrong. He spent most holidays alone on highways, which is why he said yes to the special delivery. Triple pay for a Thanksgiving run to a farmhouse 40 miles outside Des Moines. Nobody else wanted it, too remote, too late. Dwayne needed the money. The family was waiting at the table when he arrived. Dinner prepared, candles lit, warm lights glowing in every window, a perfect Norman Rockwell scene. Except the family who'd ordered the meal, the Morrison family, parents and adult children and grandchildren, had been dead for days, murdered and staged at that table, positioned to look alive from outside. The people who answered the door, who smiled and signed for the delivery and tipped too generously, were the killers, squatting in the farmhouse, waiting for food deliveries so they wouldn't have to leave a trace, planning to have their own Thanksgiving dinner before disposing of the bodies. Dwayne's instinct saved his life. That driver's sense that something was wrong, even when everything looked right. He pretended to check his equipment while calling 911. He drove away slowly, watching them in his rearview mirror, 3 men standing in the driveway, watching him leave. One raised a hand, not waving, just acknowledging, like they were letting him go, like they'd decided he wasn't worth the trouble. 3 suspects were arrested hours later. The woman who answered the door was never found. Dwayne only does daytime deliveries now, local routes, populated areas. He doesn't trust warm, lit windows anymore, doesn't trust perfect scenes, because he learned that sometimes the worst horrors hide behind the prettiest facades, and sometimes the people who seem to be waiting for you have been waiting for a very different reason than you think. These are their stories, 4 different people, 4 different Thanksgivings, 4 different ways the holiday's promise of safety became a trap. I've studied them for years now, looking for patterns, for warning signs, for some way to predict when gratitude becomes dread. The truth is, there isn't always a way to know. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts, and sometimes even that isn't enough. But these people survived to tell their stories. Or their families did. And maybe that's why I keep coming back to these files every year. Not to frighten myself, but to remember that awareness is a form of protection. That trust should be earned, not assumed. That tradition doesn't create safety, vigilance does. Let me start with Ross. November 28, 2019. His last volunteer shift for the hospital's meal delivery program. The day he learned that sometimes the people who need help most are the ones you should fear most. The day he walked into Mrs. Patricia Hemming's house and discovered what desperate love looks like when it curdles into something monstrous. The day he learned that gratitude can be a cage, and Thanksgiving dinner can last forever if someone decides you're never allowed to leave. Ross G. Brown's alarm went off at 6:30 on Thanksgiving morning, 2019. He'd set it early, out of habit more than necessity. 12 years in geriatric care had trained his body to wake before dawn, ready for the unpredictable rhythms of caring for the elderly. But today wasn't a regular shift. Today was volunteer work, the kind that made the holiday feel less like an obligation and more like something meaningful. He made coffee in the quiet kitchen of his apartment, watching the sky lighten over the suburban sprawl of Richmond, Virginia. His expertise with medications had made him valuable in the field. He could recite drug interactions the way some people recited poetry, could spot the signs of over-medication or dangerous combinations from across a room. That knowledge had saved lives. It had also made him hyper-aware of how fragile the elderly could be, how easily their carefully balanced systems could tip into crisis. That's why he'd volunteered for the hospital's Thanksgiving meal delivery program. Nobody should eat alone on Thanksgiving, he'd told the coordinator when he signed up. He meant it. He'd seen too many patients whose families had drifted away, whose children lived in other states, whose spouses had died and left them in houses that echoed with absence. If he could bring them a warm meal and a kind word on the holiday, it felt like the least he could do. The route they'd given him covered 12 addresses in the northern suburbs. Ross loaded the insulated bags into his Honda Civic and pulled out into streets already decorated with inflatable turkeys and autumn wreaths. November had been cold that year, and frosts still clung to the edges of lawns as he drove through neighborhoods where families were just beginning to wake up and start their preparations. The first 11 deliveries went exactly as expected. Quick conversations at doorways, grateful smiles from elderly recipients. One woman in her 90s who insisted on showing him pictures of her great-grandchildren. A man who'd served in Vietnam and wanted to tell Ross about the Thanksgiving he'd spent in Da Nang in 1968. Each stop took maybe 10 minutes. Each one felt good, felt right, felt like the warmth and normalcy that Thanksgiving was supposed to represent. Mrs. Patricia Hemming's address was the last on his list. The file notes were sparse. 81-year-old widow, limited family contact, lives alone in a modest ranch house on Maple Drive. Ross pulled up to the address at 2:15 in the afternoon, parking behind a row of cars that lined the curb. That was his first surprise. He'd expected an empty driveway, a quiet house, the kind of solitary Thanksgiving the program was designed to address. Instead, he heard laughter as soon as he stepped out of his car. Lots of it. The kind of full-throated, multi-generational noise that came from a house full of people having a good time. Ross grabbed the insulated bag and walked up the front path, confused but pleased. Maybe the file was outdated. Maybe her family had surprised her this year. Through the front window, he could see into the dining room a full Thanksgiving gathering, at least 8 people around a table laden with food, the warm glow of candles, the classic scene of holiday togetherness. He knocked, and Mrs. Patricia Hemmings answered within seconds. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, wearing a flour-dusted apron over a cardigan. Her smile was immediate and warm, her eyes crinkling at the corners with what looked like genuine surprise. "Oh my goodness," she said, looking at the hospital logo on the insulated bag. "The meal delivery. How sweet of them, but as you can see, my family's here this year." She gestured toward the dining room with obvious pride. "Every single one of them. It's been such a blessing." Ross smiled back, but something in his trained observation was already whispering that things weren't quite right. "That's wonderful, Mrs. Hemmings. I'm so glad you have company. I'll just leave this with you in case." "Oh no, you have to come in for just a moment," she interrupted, and her hand was suddenly on his forearm. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone her age, firm enough that he felt the pressure through his jacket. "They'd love to meet someone from the hospital. I'm always talking about how wonderful you all are." Through the doorway, Ross could see the guests more clearly now. A woman in her 40s sat with a fork halfway to her mouth, holding it there for an unnaturally long time, like she'd forgotten the motion halfway through. A man at the head of the table tried to stand when he saw Ross, but his legs seemed to give out beneath him, and he sat back down heavily, his expression confused. "Please," Mrs. Hemmings insisted, pulling gently but persistently. "Just for a moment." Ross's medical training was sending up alarm signals now. The movements he was seeing through the doorway were too slow, too uncoordinated, dreamy, almost, like everyone was moving through water. A younger woman at the far end of the table kept turning to the person next to her and asking something. Ross couldn't hear the words, but he saw her lips form the same question twice in the span of 10 seconds. "What day is it?" The speech patterns he could hear drifting from the dining room were off, too. Slurred, repetitive, confused. A man was saying something about the parade, but his words were sliding together, consonants softening, sentences trailing off mid-thought. Ross had seen these symptoms before. In patients who'd been over-medicated, in people whose benzodiazepine doses were too high, in nursing home residents whose cocktails of prescriptions had dangerous interactions that nobody had caught in time. "Mrs. Hemmings," he started, "is everyone feeling—" Come in," she said, and now she was pulling him across the threshold. "You're so kind to check on me. Let me introduce you to everyone." As Ross stepped inside, a faint smell hit him that hadn't been noticeable from the porch. Medicinal, chemical. The kind of scent he associated with pharmacies and hospital supply closets. It was subtle, almost masked by the stronger smells of roasted turkey and cinnamon. But it was there, unmistakable to someone who'd spent 12 years working with medications. Mrs. Hemmings closed the door behind him with a soft click. "I told myself I'd stay for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes to make sure everyone was okay. That was my first mistake." The dining room looked like a photograph from a magazine, except for one detail. Nobody was eating. The turkey had been carved, slices arranged carefully on the serving platter, but most of the plates held food that had been pushed around rather than consumed. Everything was getting cold, congealing. The cranberry sauce had developed a skin. The gravy had a film across its surface. Ross's eyes moved to the kitchen, visible through an open doorway, and that's when he saw them. Multiple prescription bottles lined up on the counter. Not 1 or 2, but at least a dozen. Empty. Their orange caps removed, labels facing out like they were on display. His trained eye caught the names even from a distance. Lorazepam, diazepam, zolpidem, oxycodone, benzodiazepines, sedatives, pain management medications. The kind of pharmacy you'd see in a hospice patient's home, except these were all empty. He turned back to the guests, his medical training now cataloguing what he was seeing with clinical precision. Constricted pupils across the board. Every single person at the table showed signs of significant sedation. Their motor responses were delayed when someone reached for a glass, Their hand moved slowly, overshooting or undershooting the target. Cognitive impairment was obvious in their attempts at conversation. A middle-aged man was trying to tell a story, but kept losing the thread, starting over, forgetting he'd already said the same sentence twice. Classic signs of oversedation. Acute benzodiazepine intoxication, probably combined with opiates. Ross had seen it before in patients whose doctors hadn't coordinated prescriptions, in elderly people who'd accidentally doubled doses. But this wasn't accidental. The sheer number of people affected, all at once, in the same house, this was something else entirely. A young man, maybe mid-20s, was staring at Ross with desperate eyes. His mouth worked, trying to form words. "Can't," he managed, his tongue thick. "We can't." "She won't." "Stephen, honey, you're mumbling again," Mrs. Hemmings said brightly, patting the young man's shoulder as she moved past. "You really should eat more. You've barely touched your plate." She turned to Ross, her smile unwavering. They finally decided to spend the holiday properly this year. After so many years of excuses, work, other plans, too busy, they all came home. Every single one. Isn't that wonderful? Ross felt ice forming in his stomach. "Mrs. Hemmings, I think some of your guests might not be feeling well. Maybe I should—" "Oh, they're fine, just tired from traveling. Big meal, you know how it is. Makes everyone sleepy." She squeezed his arm again. "Now, you'll stay for dessert, won't you? I made 3 pies. Actually, I should use your restroom first, if that's all right." "Of course, down the hall, second door on the left." Ross moved carefully down the hallway, his heart hammering now. He passed the bathroom and kept going, glancing back to make sure Mrs. Hemmings hadn't followed. She was back in the dining room, fussing over her guests, adjusting napkins, refilling water glasses like this was a normal family dinner. The master bedroom door was open. Ross stepped inside and immediately saw it on the nightstand. A spiral notebook, open to a page covered in meticulous handwriting. He picked it up with shaking hands. The chart was detailed, horrifyingly detailed. 3 days of entries, starting on November 26th. Each person had their own section with names, weights, dosages, times administered, and behavioral notes. Stephen, resistant to initial dose, increased to 5 milligrams at dinner. Still alert at 9 p.m., administered additional 3 milligrams. Dean responded well to 4 milligrams, but too alert by morning. Needs evening maintenance dose. Sarah, excellent response, may need to reduce to avoid respiratory depression. This wasn't accidental. This was systematic, calculated. Someone had planned this with the precision of a clinical trial. Mrs. Hemmings had been drugging her family for 3 days, adjusting dosages, monitoring responses, keeping them in a state of sedated compliance. Ross looked up from the notebook and saw the front door through the bedroom doorway. A new deadbolt gleamed on the inside. But something was wrong with its orientation. The lock mechanism faced outward. It was installed backward, designed to lock people in, not keep people out. A sound in the hallway made him drop the notebook back on the nightstand. He stepped out and saw a teenage girl, maybe 16, crawling toward him. She'd made it halfway down the hall from one of the other bedrooms, moving with agonizing slowness. "Please," she whispered when she saw him. Her pupils were pinpoints. "Help us." She put something in the juice. "We can't stay awake. Can't leave." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "My phone." "She took all our phones." "You're going to be okay," Ross said quietly, kneeling beside her. "I'm going to get help. Just hold on." Now, Emily, you should be resting." Mrs. Hemmings' voice came from behind him, and Ross stood up quickly. She was standing at the end of the hallway, still smiling, still holding a dish towel like she'd just been washing dishes. "You know you get so tired after big meals." Ross kept his voice calm, professional, the voice he used with agitated patience. "Mrs. Hemmings, I think we need to talk about—" "They always leave," she interrupted. And for the first time, her smile wavered. "Every single year. Too busy for Thanksgiving, they say. Can't make the trip, have other plans. Do you know what it's like, spending every holiday alone? Waiting for phone calls that never come?" The smile returned, harder now. "So this year, I made sure they'd stay. We're having a proper Thanksgiving, all weekend long, like a real family." "You need to let them go," Ross said, backing slowly toward the front door. "They need medical attention. They're fine, they're just resting. We're going to have a wonderful time together." She took a step forward. "You're not leaving, are you? We have so much food, and you've been so kind." You should stay for pie. Ross's hand found the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. Locked from the outside, just as he'd feared. But his fingers found the chain lock above it. She hadn't secured that one. He slid it free and pulled the door open. I need to get something from my car, he said, maintaining his calm tone. I'll be right back. He walked to his Honda, not running, not showing panic, got inside, locked the doors. Called 911 with trembling fingers. While he reported the address and situation to the dispatcher, he watched the house through his windshield. Through the dining room window, he could see Mrs. Hemmings, sitting down at the head of the table, smiling at her captive family, finally having the Thanksgiving she'd always wanted. Stephen Marks had been documenting everything since his freshman year of journalism school. His phone was always in his hand, his camera always recording, capturing life as it happened. That's why he'd pitched First Adult Thanksgiving as his video project for documentary storytelling. 304 college roommates, all 20 years old, cooking their first holiday meal without parental supervision. Raw, real, unscripted. Professor Chen had approved it immediately. Okay, we're rolling, Stephen announced, propping his camera on the bookshelf to capture the kitchen. November 28th, 2019. 4 idiots try to cook a turkey without burning down the house. This is either going to be heartwarming or evidence for the fire marshal. Speak for yourself, Potter said from the counter, where he was methodically measuring ingredients for stuffing. Some of us actually read the instructions. Potter Webb was like that, careful, organized, the kind of person who checked the locks twice before bed and kept a detailed spreadsheet of household expenses. He'd been the one who found the rental listing. Instructions are suggestions, Dean called out from the living room, where he was supposed to be setting the table, but was actually scrolling through his phone. Dean Harrison was the loud one, the charismatic one, the one who knew everyone on campus and sang Beyoncé in the shower at 2 a.m. Thanksgiving is about vibes, not measurements. The vibe is going to be food poisoning if you don't help, Micah muttered, but he was smiling. Micah Torres was the quiet one, the philosophy major who kept lights on all night because he claimed he studied better that way. Stephen had learned over 3 months of living together that Micah was more observant than he let on, noticing things the rest of them missed. The house they'd rented was a century-old beast near campus, all high ceilings and creaky floors and architectural quirks that gave it character. A sealed door in the living room that their landlord had vaguely explained as old renovation work. A closet in Potter's room that seemed too shallow compared to how the room's dimensions should work. Mismatched window placements. The kind of charming but dated features that made rent surprisingly cheap. Some houses just want tenants, the landlord had said when Potter questioned the price. This one's been empty too long, needs people in it. They'd joked about it being haunted, of course. Every college student living in an old house made those jokes, but none of them believed it. It was just old. Pipes knocked, floors settled, wood expanded and contracted. Normal house sounds. Hey Potter, we need serving dishes, Stephen called out, adjusting the camera angle. Check that cabinet above the fridge. I think I saw some up there when we moved in. Potter dragged a chair over and climbed up, reaching into the highest cabinet. There's some plates here, and a bunch of weight. He pulled out a dusty leather-bound journal from the very back, behind stacked dishes that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. What's this? He climbed down and brought it to the kitchen table, where they'd been prepping food. The journal was old-looking, leather cracked, pages yellowed at the edges. Unexpected. Maybe it's the previous tenant's diary, Dean said, wandering over with interest. Let's check it out. Could be juicy. Stephen zoomed in as Potter opened to the first page. The handwriting was meticulous, each letter carefully formed. But it was the date that made Potter's smile fade. November 3rd, he read aloud, 2019. That's when we moved in, Micah said quietly. Potter continued reading. 4 new residents. I'm grateful for the company after so long alone. The tall one, Stephen, talks to himself when cooking. The quiet one, Micah, leaves lights on all night. The loud one, Dean, sings in the shower. The careful one, Potter checks locks twice. I'll learn more. The kitchen went silent, except for the timer ticking on the oven. Very funny, Dean said after a moment. Which one of you did this? Stephen, this is for your video project, right? But Stephen was staring at the journal with his filmmaker's eye, and he could see the dust on it was real, undisturbed, until Potter grabbed it. I didn't write that. Potter flipped through the pages. More entries. dated progressively. November 5th, November 9th, November 12th, each one containing details about their lives, their routines, their habits. November 12th, Potter read, his voice getting quieter. Stephen leaves for his 8 a.m. class at 7:43 exactly. Potter studies until 2 a.m. most nights. Dean's girlfriend visits Wednesdays. Micah cries sometimes when he thinks no one's listening. I listen. Micah's face went pale. I don't. How would anyone know that? The entries continued, showing surveillance that couldn't possibly come from outside observations. The TV shows they watched, conversations they'd had in their bedrooms, items they'd misplaced, Stephen's favorite pen, Dean's left earbud, Potter's psychology textbook, with notes about where they'd been moved to and when they'd been returned. Stephen's hands were shaking as he held the camera steady, his journalistic instinct overriding his fear. This was real. This was happening. This was his documentary now. Potter reached the last page with writing. The date was that morning, November 28th. Thanksgiving, he read aloud. They're cooking together. I'm grateful for them. I hope they're grateful for me. I hope they'll understand when I finally introduce myself tonight. 4 roommates stared at the journal in silence. Stephen's camera was still recording, capturing the moment their faces changed from confusion to understanding to fear. This has to be a prank, right? Dean said, but his voice lacked conviction. Someone's messing with us. Has to be. That's when they heard it. A sound from inside the walls. Not the settling of old wood or the knocking of pipes. Shuffling, deliberate, footsteps moving through spaces that shouldn't exist. Not mice, not the house settling, something bigger. Something that had been there all along. That's when we realized whoever wrote the journal wasn't describing us from memory. They were still here, still watching, and they'd been waiting for this moment. They spread the journal entries across the kitchen table, comparing them against the house layout. The details were too specific, too intimate. November 7th mentioned they'd watched 3 episodes of The Office after dinner, true. November 10th described an argument Potter and Dean had about dirty dishes, including exact quotes neither of them remembered saying out loud. November 15th noted that Micah had been reading Camus in his bedroom and had underlined a passage about absurdity. How could anyone see that? Micah whispered. I was alone, door closed. Look at this entry, Stephen said, pointing to November 19th. My pen. The one I thought I lost. It says here, moved Stephen's pen to bookshelf. Returned it to desk drawer November 21st. That's exactly when I found it. I thought I'd just missed it. Dean was staring at the sealed door in the living room. The landlord said that was old renovation work. But what if it's not? He crossed to it, running his hands along the edges. Micah, come look at this. Micah knelt by the door, examining the seal more carefully. These nails aren't old. Look at the wood around them splintered, but the damage is fresh. And these screwdriver marks. He touched gouges in the doorframe. Someone sealed this recently. From the other side. Potter was in his bedroom, measuring. They heard him swear, something Potter almost never did. There's at least 3 feet of space unaccounted for, he called out. My closet is only 4 feet deep, but from outside, the wall should be at least 7 feet from the window. Where's the other 3 feet? The sound from the walls was more obvious now. Not trying to hide anymore. Deliberate footsteps, movement through spaces that shouldn't exist. Stephen's camera captured it all, rhythmic tapping, shuffling, the creak of weight on hidden floors. They started finding evidence everywhere once they knew to look. Small holes in the walls, perfectly positioned behind furniture, an outlet cover in Dean's room that came away too easily, revealing a wider opening behind it that had been covered with black fabric. The heating vent in the hallway was larger than standard, modified to allow not just airflow but visual access. Someone built a network through this house, Potter said, his voice shaking. Between the walls, in the ceiling spaces. This must have taken months, years, maybe. Micah was flipping through the journal again, and his face went white. There's more. I didn't see it before the last page. He read aloud. Tonight I'll finally introduce myself. I've prepared what to say. Hello, I've been living here too. I hope that's okay. If they understand, we can be family. If they try to leave, I'll have to stop them. Thanksgiving is about family. We're family now. I've been alone so long. We're leaving, Dean said immediately. Right now. Grab your keys. We're gone. But the front door wouldn't unlock. The deadbolt turned, but something in the mechanism was jammed. Dean threw his shoulder against it. Nothing. Windows, Stephen said, running to the living room. but the windows were painted shut, and when he looked closer, the handles had been removed entirely. Just smooth wood where the cranks should be. Potter tried the back door. Heavy furniture, the bookshelf from the hallway, had been moved to block it. "We didn't move this," he said. "This wasn't here an hour ago." Micah pulled out his phone. No signal. He looked at the others. "I had full bars 10 minutes ago." "Signal jammer," Stephen said quietly, still filming. "Someone's blocking our phones." The realization settled over them like ice water. They weren't just being watched, they were trapped. The sealed door in the living room began to splinter. Not slowly, not subtly. Someone was pushing through from the other side, and they weren't being careful anymore. Wood cracked. Nails shrieked as they pulled free from old timber. A gap appeared at the top of the doorframe, widening with each impact. "Potter's room," Stephen said. "It's the only door with a working lock. Move, now." They ran down the hallway, Dean grabbing a kitchen knife on the way, Potter scooping up his laptop. They made it into Potter's bedroom and slammed the door, turning the old-fashioned key in the lock. Potter's desk went against the door. Then his dresser, his bookshelf. Sounds throughout the house now. Doors opening, footsteps in the halls, no longer trying to be quiet. Moving through the regular spaces, not just the hidden ones. Then a voice. Right outside the bedroom door. "I just want to meet you." The voice was male, but the inflection was wrong, too practiced. Like someone had rehearsed the words without understanding the emotion behind them. "We've lived together for weeks. You know me. I know you. We're already family." Long pause. "I've been so grateful for your company. The house was so quiet before. So empty." Another pause, longer this time. "Why are you hiding?" "I made sure we could spend Thanksgiving together. All of us. Isn't that what the holiday is for?" Stephen had his laptop open, connecting to Wi-Fi. 911 dispatcher on the line, keeping his voice low. Potter was crying silently. Micah had his arms wrapped around himself. Dean gripped the knife, staring at the barricaded door. The doorknob rattled, tested. The voice continued. "I understand you're nervous. I was nervous too at first. But you'll see. We'll have dinner. We'll talk. We'll be the family I've been waiting for." The voice outside kept talking, kept explaining how grateful it was for our company, how it had been so alone before we arrived. And the thing that terrified us most wasn't what it was saying, it was how long it paused between sentences, like it was reading from a script, learning how normal people talk. Jose K. Galante understood structures the way most people understood faces intuitively, recognizing patterns, seeing what didn't belong. 15 years as an architect, specializing in historic home restoration, had taught him how houses held secrets in their bones, how spaces could be repurposed, how walls could hide what people wanted forgotten. He hadn't been home in almost 2 years. Work had kept him away, at first projects in Cleveland, then Columbus, then a restoration in Cincinnati that ate 6 months. Then the excuses came easier. "Too busy. Too tired. Next month, Mum, I promise." His parents were in their late 70s now, his father's voice getting softer on the phone. His mother's developing that fragile quality that made guilt settle in his chest like stones. She'd called in mid-November, 2019. "Jose, please, just for Thanksgiving. Your father and I, we're not getting any younger." Guilt finally won. He drove the 2 hours from Toledo on Wednesday night, November 27th, watching familiar landmarks appear in his headlights. The house looked exactly as he remembered, same blue shutters, same crooked mailbox, the same maple tree in the front yard. He climbed the porch steps, hearing the same creak in the third board he'd heard since childhood. He unlocked the front door with his old key, calling out, "Mom, Dad, I'm here." His mother appeared from the living room, and her face went through an expression Jose had never seen before. Not joy, not relief, confusion, almost fear. "Jose," she said. "But you were just here yesterday." His father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, equally puzzled. "Son, you said you'd be here tomorrow, Thursday morning. We weren't expecting you tonight." Jose set down his overnight bag slowly. "Mum, Dad, I haven't been here since Christmas. 2 years ago. Christmas of 2017. "That's not right," his mother said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. "You've been visiting. Every week, sometimes twice a week. We had dinner last Sunday. You brought flowers. Yellow ones, my favorites." She turned her phone screen toward him. Photos, recent photos, someone sitting at their dining room table, someone with his build, his general coloring, his dark hair. But the face was wrong. Similar, but not his. The nose slightly different, the jawline softer. "That's not me," Jose said quietly. His father was shaking his head. "You helped me fix the porch step last week. We talked about that project you're working on in Akron, the Victorian restoration." "Dad, I'm not working on anything in Akron. I've never worked there." His parents exchanged glances, and Jose saw something break between them, a shared reality cracking. "I need to check something," Jose said, heading upstairs to his childhood bedroom. The room looked lived in. Men's clothes in the closet, button-down shirts in a size smaller than Jose wore, brands he'd never buy. The dresser held toiletries, cologne he didn't recognize, shaving cream for sensitive skin when Jose had never had sensitive skin, a phone charger for an Android when Jose used an iPhone. The bed had been slept in recently, the pillow still holding a head's indentation. "Are you settling in okay, honey?" His mother called from downstairs, her voice uncertain now, reality and memory at war. Jose went to the garage. His father's old toolbox sat in its usual spot, but next to it was a newer one. Expensive brands, organized with professional care, tools his father had never owned. The back porch step, the one that had been broken for 3 years, was newly repaired. Professional work. His father couldn't do that anymore, not with his arthritis. Mrs. Chen from next door saw him through the fence. "Jose, you're around a lot lately, twice this week already." "What car does he drive?" Jose asked. "Red sedan, Honda, I think. Why?" Jose drove a blue truck. "What does he usually wear?" "Business casual, mostly. Nice jackets. Always well dressed." Jose lived in jeans and work boots. He stood in his childhood driveway, understanding spreading through him like cold water. Someone had been systematically replacing him in his parents' lives, not just visiting, integrating, establishing presence, learning their routines, their preferences, their deteriorating eyesight that made them see what they wanted to see. The question was, what was the end game? He walked back inside, past family photos lining the hallway, his graduation, his birthdays, holidays, captured in frames. He looked at his parents in the kitchen, preparing for a Thanksgiving that now had one too many guests expected. I looked at the family photos lining the hallway, graduation, birthdays, holidays, and realized I'd let my absence create a vacuum, and something had filled it. Something that knew exactly how to be the son my parents wished they had. Thanksgiving morning was awkward. His parents moved around the kitchen with Jose, but they kept starting sentences and stopping mid-word, confusion crossing their faces like clouds. "When you fixed the..." his mother began, then caught herself. "Oh wait, that wasn't you. Was it?" His father mentioned a conversation about the Cavs game, then stopped, awareness dawning. "We didn't talk about that, did we?" Jose tried to be present, helpful, attentive. He peeled potatoes, he set the table. He asked about their neighbors, their health, their routines. Overcompensating for 2 years of absence, guilt mixing with anger. Someone had taken advantage of his neglect, had seen the vacuum he'd created and filled it with lies. They cooked together, attempting normalcy. The turkey went in the oven. His mother made her cranberry sauce. His father told the same stories he always told. But underneath, everything was a tremor of uncertainty, like the ground beneath their feet had proven unreliable. His mother began setting the table, 3 places. Then she paused, her hand hovering over the silverware drawer. She looked confused. She added 2 more place settings. "Mom," Jose said carefully, "why 5 places?" She looked at him, then at the table, then back at him. Isn't Sarah coming?" Jose had never dated anyone named Sarah, never even mentioned that name. His father appeared in the doorway, and something shifted in his expression. Worry, dawning awareness. "She's been here for Sunday dinners, your girlfriend. Sweet girl, works in marketing." "Dad, I don't have a girlfriend named Sarah." His parents exchanged glances. Reality versus memory, fighting for dominance. His mother's hands started shaking. "What's happening to us?" she whispered, tears forming. Is this dementia? Are we losing our minds?" Jose crossed to her, taking her hands. "No, Mum, you're not losing anything. Someone's been lying to you. Someone's been pretending to be me." He tried to explain the clothes in his room, the tools in the garage, the neighbors' descriptions. His parents struggled to process it, their memories feeling real even as logic insisted otherwise. That's when they heard it, the back door opening. Footsteps in the kitchen. Confident, familiar, like someone who belonged. A male voice called out, "Sorry I'm late, Mum, traffic was terrible." The voice was similar to José's, but the inflection was slightly different. A photocopy, close but not exact. José stood frozen in the dining room. His parents looked between him and the kitchen doorway, their faces white. The stranger walked in carrying yellow flowers, wearing a jacket similar to one José owned but cheaper. Smiling, comfortable. He belonged here in a way José suddenly felt he didn't. Then the stranger saw José sitting at the table. His expression froze. The smile locked in place, but behind it, José watched his face cycle through emotions: surprise, calculation, decision. For 5 seconds, 3 people stared at each other in complete silence. Then the stranger ran. José chased him. Through the mudroom, out the side door. The stranger knew the house layout perfectly, cutting through shortcuts José had forgotten existed between the garage and fence, through the neighbor's yard, across the street. He vanished into the neighborhood like smoke. José returned breathless. His mother was sobbing. His father was on the phone with 911. Police came. Questions were asked. His parents were devastated, confused, questioning everything. What was real? Which memories belonged to their real son, and which to the imposter? Did they prefer the version who visited weekly, who fixed things, who brought flowers? The investigation revealed a sophisticated pattern. The stranger had targeted multiple elderly couples, whose adult children lived far away. Different names, different identities, always building toward financial control. Power of attorney papers were found in the toolbox, unsigned, but prepared. The woman named Sarah was an accomplice, never caught. José moved back within a month, quit his job, sold his condo, moved into his childhood bedroom after throwing away the imposter's belongings. I spend my Thanksgiving dinners with my parents now, every year. But sometimes I catch my mother looking at me with that same confused expression she had when the stranger walked through the door. And I wonder if she's comparing me to him, measuring me against the son who came every week, who fixed things, who brought flowers. The son who was everything I wasn't, even if he wasn't real. Dwayne N. Cooper had been driving trucks for 23 years, spending most holidays alone on highways while other people gathered around tables. He knew empty roads the way sailors know currents intuitively, recognizing the difference between isolated and wrong. Abandoned rest stops, rural routes that appeared on no map. The particular silence of 3 a.m. on a forgotten stretch of interstate. Thanksgiving morning, 2019, dispatch called with a special delivery, triple pay for a holiday run to a farm 40 miles outside Des Moines. Nobody else wanted it, too remote. Too late, cutting into family time. Dwayne's daughter had tuition due in January. He accepted without hesitation. The delivery was a complete Thanksgiving meal from a high-end catering service, ordered online, prepaid, recipient, Morrison family, rural address. Dwayne loaded the insulated containers into his truck, thinking about people wealthy enough to order a whole holiday dinner delivered to the middle of nowhere. The route became progressively more isolated. Paved roads gave way to gravel, then to dirt. His GPS signal weakened, cutting out entirely, forcing him to rely on printed directions dispatch had provided. The landscape stretched flat in every direction, harvested fields, distant tree lines, farmhouses becoming sparse. Late afternoon sun hung low, temperature dropping as shadows lengthened across empty corn rows. The farmhouse appeared suddenly, white clapboard emerging from the dusk. Front porch, red barn behind, warm lights glowing in every window. A minivan in the driveway carried Michigan plates family visiting from out of state. The scene looked perfect, like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. But something felt off. Dwayne couldn't identify what, exactly. Just that driver's instinct kicking in. The one that had kept him alive through ice storms and jackknifed semis and routes through neighborhoods where trucks got stripped for parts. Something was wrong. He backed his truck up to the house, unloaded the insulated containers, and knocked on the front door. A woman in her 30s answered, her smile too big, too enthusiastic. "Oh, wonderful, we've been waiting." Mum ordered this as a surprise for everyone. She signed his tablet quickly, her signature barely legible, and tipped him $50. Too generous for a prepaid delivery. Behind her, Dwayne could see into the dining room. Table set for 6. People moving around, but their movements seemed choreographed, deliberate, like actors hitting marks. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes didn't move naturally, they stared, fixed on his face, unblinking. Her voice had that slightly off quality of someone reciting lines they'd memorized. "You folks enjoy your meal," Dwayne said, backing toward his truck. "We will, thank you so much." Still that fixed smile. Dwayne's instinct was screaming now. He pretended to check his equipment, moving slowly around the truck while his eyes catalogued details. A purse on the front lawn, half hidden in shadow. Contents spilled across the grass like someone had dropped it while running. The minivan's driver's door was slightly ajar. Through the window, he could see a phone in the cup holder, screen lit with notifications. He counted them from where he stood, 47 missed calls. The GPS unit mounted on the dashboard showed the destination had been entered on November 26th, 2 days ago. Nobody drives 2 days to arrive for Thanksgiving dinner. Through a side window, partially obscured by curtains, Dwayne glimpsed basement stairs. At the bottom, barely visible, a shoe. A woman's dress shoe, attached to a leg in dark stockings. Not moving. Voices drifted from inside the house. Male voice, casual. "Where should we put them until it's time to eat?" Another male voice responding, "Basement's cold enough. They'll keep." Dwayne's hand was already moving toward his phone. "I've delivered to 1,000 places over 23 years. I know when to mind my business and when to trust my gut." My gut was screaming. These people weren't the Morrison family. But someone inside this house was. Dwayne moved slowly, deliberately, acting natural. Just a delivery driver finishing his route, nothing unusual. He glanced through the dining room window as he walked back to his truck, and that's when he saw it clearly. The family seated at the table wasn't eating. They were just sitting, facing the table, positioned like they were mid-conversation. But one figure, an elderly man at the head, hadn't moved at all. Not even the slight shift of breathing. Completely still. They weren't moving because they weren't alive. Positioned like mannequins, staged. Someone had arranged bodies at a Thanksgiving table to look normal from outside, to look like a family gathering for anyone who might glance through the window. The realization hit Dwayne like ice water. The woman appeared in a different window now, watching him. Her smile was gone, just watching, calculating, trying to determine whether he'd noticed, whether he was a problem. Other figures moved inside, 3 men Dwayne hadn't seen before. They weren't dressed for a holiday, work clothes, gloves, moving with purpose behind the seated guests, no longer trying to hide. Dwayne reached his cab and climbed in casually, like nothing was wrong. His hands were steady. 23 years of driving had taught him to stay calm when things went sideways. He pretended to check paperwork while pulling out his phone, keeping it low, dialing 911. "This is Dwayne Cooper," he said quietly. "I'm at a farmhouse, rural Route 14, about 40 miles west of Des Moines. I just made a delivery and I think there's a hostage situation. Or worse, there are bodies, people staged at a dinner table. Send units now." The dispatcher's voice was professional, urgent. "Units are on the way. Stay on the line. Are you in immediate danger?" The front door opened. 3 men walked onto the porch. Not rushing, not threatening, just watching. Large men, all of them, wearing work jackets and jeans. One of them called out, his voice casual, almost friendly. Something wrong with the order. Dwayne's training kicked in the same instinct that had kept him safe in truck stops, where asking the wrong question got you hurt. "Don't show fear, don't provoke, act normal." "Nope, all good," he called back. "Just checking my equipment. You folks enjoy your meal." He started the engine, put the truck in gear, and pulled away slowly. Not too fast. Don't show panic. Don't let them know you know. In his rearview mirror, he watched the 3 men standing in the driveway, watching him leave. One of them raised his hand. Not waving goodbye, acknowledging, like they were letting him go. Like they'd made a calculation and decided he wasn't worth the trouble. Dwayne drove to the main road and parked, waiting. His hands were shaking now that he was out of sight. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking questions, keeping him grounded. Within 15 minutes, sheriff's vehicles appeared, lights cutting through the growing darkness. Dwayne explained everything he'd seen, the staged bodies, the gloved men, the purse on the lawn, the phone full of missed calls. The sheriff approached the house cautiously with backup, weapons drawn. What they found was worse than expected. The Morrison family, parents in their 60s, 2 adult children, 2 grandchildren, ages 8 and 10, had been murdered, all 6 of them. Staged at the dinner table, positioned to look alive from outside. The bodies had been there for at least 2 days, the coroner would later determine. November 26th, the day the GPS showed the minivan had arrived. The killers had been squatting in the farmhouse, using the victims' accounts, their phones, their online presence. They'd ordered the Thanksgiving meal using Mrs. Morrison's credit card to avoid leaving a trace, no trips to grocery stores, no witnesses, no digital trail, except one that looked completely normal. They'd planned to have their own dinner, celebrate with the food Dwayne delivered, then dispose of the bodies and move on. 3 suspects were arrested 6 hours later at a gas station 60 miles away. The woman who'd answered the door was never found. She'd vanished completely, no identification, no fingerprints in the system, no trace, like she'd never existed. The investigation revealed a pattern. The group had targeted rural families during holidays, waiting for online food deliveries, killing the families, assuming their identities temporarily. They'd use the homes as bases, steal identities and valuables, then disappear before anyone noticed something was wrong. The Morrison family had been expected, welcoming, posting about their Thanksgiving plans on social media, perfect victims. Dwayne's testimony was crucial for prosecution, but the woman's disappearance haunted the case. Somewhere out there, she was still at large. Dwayne quit long-haul trucking 3 months later. He couldn't drive rural routes anymore, couldn't look at isolated farmhouses without wondering. He took a local delivery job, daylight hours only, populated areas, no exceptions. His colleagues thought he was paranoid. He never explained. Sometimes he drives past farmhouses on highways and sees warm, lit windows, happy scenes, holiday decorations, and he wonders what's really happening inside those walls. How many deliveries had he made over 23 years to places that weren't what they seemed? How many times had he just driven away? He keeps the dispatch printout from that Thanksgiving delivery in his wallet. A reminder that normal isn't always safe, that instinct matters more than manners, that sometimes the worst things hide behind the prettiest facades. He never spent another Thanksgiving driving. Now he stays home with his daughter, helps her cook, keeps the doors locked, but he still checks the news for rural incidents. Still wonders about the woman who smiled at him with eyes that didn't move right. Where she is now, whose door she's answering. Every Thanksgiving, I think about the Morrison family. About how they probably spent hours preparing, cleaning, decorating. How they probably argued about the menu, laughed at old stories, looked forward to being together. How they ordered that meal as a gift to themselves, one less thing to worry about. And I think about how the last thing they saw was someone at their door, smiling, offering exactly what they'd hoped for, until they let them inside. These are the 4 stories I've carried with me for years. 4 different Thanksgivings, 4 different violations of trust, Mrs. Hemmings drugging her family to keep them close. The stranger living in Stephen and his roommate's walls. The imposter replacing Jose in his parents' lives. The killers staging a family dinner with the people they'd murdered. What links them isn't just the holiday. It's the vulnerability of trust during moments when we're supposed to feel safest. Tradition makes us complacent. Gratitude can blind us to danger. We open our doors, we invite people in, we assume the best, because that's what the holiday asks of us. The statistics I mentioned at the beginning, the 23% spike in domestic incidents during Thanksgiving week, those are the predictable crimes, the ones that follow patterns. But these 4 cases remind us that some dangers don't show up in data. They show up at your door with flowers, or hide in your walls, or answer when you deliver a meal you thought would bring comfort. If these stories changed how you'll approach this Thanksgiving, good. That's not paranoia, that's awareness. Trust your instincts, verify strangers. Check medications if you're caring for elderly relatives. Inspect your home's unusual spaces. Pay attention when something feels wrong. We gather to give thanks, but sometimes we should be more careful about what and who we're grateful for. Stay grateful, stay safe, and maybe check your basement one more time before dinner.